Hello and welcome to the LENKER podcast, where we shun platitudes in favor of real business wisdom. I'm Matt O'Leary, and our guest today is Mark de Grasse, former president of the influential marketing training platform DigitalMarketer. Mark's worked in branding and content creation for over 20 years, personally creating over 30,000 pieces of content in all media forms. He's a true marketing expert and educator, keynote speaker, content strategist, AI advocate, sci-fi enthusiast, a man of many talents, and apparently more than 24 hours in his day. We delve into Mark's transition into and away from DigitalMarketer, and Mark really opens up and shares some of his deepest insights on aligning the personal and professional. Mark, welcome to the show. Kevin and I were super excited to have been interviewed by you late last year. I think the episode on the Digital Marketer podcast is coming out in May. And one of the things I noticed was just how much we really did seem to have in common from a value standpoint, from just an ambition and a desire just to have a positive impact on the industry and to kind of influence it in a good direction. And as Kevin and I were kind of talking about this time with you today, obviously you've just gone through a big transition, moving on from digital marketers. And I thought, wow, what about talking about the things that lead us to make these big changes? What is it that helps a person know that it's time to move on from one stage of their career to another? And what opens the door to that ambition? Kevin, when I shared that with him, he seemed to think that was pretty good. And Kevin, what are your thoughts about that topic?
Well, those kinds of decisions have been important in both John's life and my life. We both experienced sort of dramatic transitions, and there's always a push and a pull. There's something holding us back because of the status quo, and there's all these feelings, and then that thing that draws us forward, and then there's this: what are the events or the factors that have tipped the balance so that now is the time to make that change? I'm always interested in unpacking those moments.
Love that. Well, it's an excellent topic. I think that most people don't plan it. I'm kind of an opportunist, and I've always been like that. And so for me, staying at Digital Marketer, I was there for 2.5 years. That was an enormous stint of time for me because my longest held job prior to that was probably maybe 2 years. Like, I've never had jobs for that long. And my entire career has actually been this oscillation between having a position and having a company. And then usually what happens is I'll realize, like, okay, I'm missing some component or skill that I think I need. And then I go try to get it by having a job. And then I get paid and I get to learn. And hopefully it leads to the thing that I'm trying to achieve. Now, for the longest time, I never had anything I was trying to achieve. I was just essentially surviving and hoping. And so this is actually the first transition in my entire life, probably, that I really thought about it and, came up with a plan to make it happen. And then I'm actually doing it. So this transition is different than any other one I've had in the past. And I think it's going to be the best. But to get to it, I had to go through, I think it's probably been 5 years, a 5-year transformation cycle, where I feel like I'm a completely different person from when I started Digital Marketer, which Digital Marketer was a big catalyst for the major change through, massive failures for the most part. And then figuring out what happened and why and what it leads to next. So I could talk about the professional angle if you want, or I could go into the personal development side, which was much more significant, but less, what's the word I'm looking for? Understandable if you haven't gone through it. Like, I don't know if either of you have gone through. I call mine a Kundalini awakening, which is
we've had these, and maybe we'll share a little bit. But if we're gonna have the opening scene of the movie of this podcast, I'm thinking that where the first scene should start is at this crossroads you are at right before joining digital marketers. You've already kind of talked about some of the ups and downs and the headspace you were in personally, professionally, but where do we find you what state of mind, and then how did that opportunity unfold, and what was it that made you really believe that it was the right moment for you to go and join an organization like that, such a a profoundly important company in the history of digital marketing, and then to take the role that you took. So why don't you paint that picture and then bring us through to this most recent transition, and kind of what you learned between those two chapter markers in your life.
Sure. Okay. So the transition to digital marketer was that actually flowed pretty well, because what happened was I had an agency for about 6 years, and what I was doing was essentially trying to train small business owners how to be marketers. And so I would say, okay, you need a new brand. We're going to build your new brand. I'll build your logo, build all the different elements, build your website, build your funnel, give you social media graphics. And then what I would do is shoot like 20 to 30 custom videos where I showed them how to use all the things that I built. And what I found was that they only got watched about 5% of the time. And so my whole objective, which was to make small business owners independent, and that the bigger picture was I was trying to fix the internet, because I found that the internet online was really bad because it was generated by marketers. And what it should be generated by is the professionals that know how to do the crap. And so I was like, well, if I could just train the small business owners to do the content, then it'll fix the internet. And I failed at that. And I actually never really liked having the agency itself. It was actually, I was trying to create digital marketer at the start. So what led to that was I had content platform. It was called My Med Methods. It was a fitness magazine that sold, well, basically it was the platform that sold the equipment that was the real business. And so I sold that company to On It, which is one of Joe Rogan's companies, and became the chief fitness officer. I was really a content executive, but I was like chief fitness officer. That's so goofy. And I built their content platform. I built their certification system. I hired all the team, and basically built the organization around teaching people how to train properly. And then I left there after a year. I wrote a book called Unconventional Marketing for Fitness Professionals, where I said, here's how I built my entire organization organically from scratch and sold it. And so here's the whole system for it. And then I was going to make what I called the Megamad Institute to build courses to help people do the same thing. But people just didn't want to do it, and they just kept asking me to do the thing. And so I started the agency to be like, well, everybody just wants me to do the thing, so I'll do the thing. So I came up with that system, but I'm like, I don't want to be an agency. So I'm not going to have continuous clients. I'm going to have projects, and then they'll have the thing, and I could leave the business whenever I want, because I didn't actually build a business. I just built something to, pass the time for 6 years. Now, eventually I realized, okay, it's been, I think, 5 years at that point. I'm like, I'm still miserable. I still don't like this business. And so, the fractional CMO thing, I had heard about it. I'm like, that sounds kind of cool. You go in, you build, a system, and then you hand it off to the people. That's what I've been trying to do the whole time. And so I had a few of these clients, and one of them was Richard Lindner, one of the owners of Digital Marketer. I'd helped him build his personal brand. And so, he had come to the studio, we shot pictures, realized that our kids were in like the same class at the school at the time, and our wives were friends. And I was like, oh, this actually kind of totally fits. And they were trying to reform Digital Marketer after the big reorg that they went through after COVID. And so, because they went fully remote, and they were going to come back and decided not to. And so essentially there was no like leadership of the digital marketer team. There was just the whole organization. So they said, hey, Mark, do you want to come in and be the president? And at the time I was actually working with them to be basically like an external content executive, where I was building the content strategies for each one of the brands. And I was like, well, president, that sounds pretty cool, right? I mean, that's a feather I could stick in my cap. And even though I never have wanted a job ever, even though I take these positions sometimes, I was like, that's worth it. Like, that'll be good. And I'll be able to network with all these people that actually want to learn marketing, which is why I was trying to teach in the first place. So it all kind of fit together, and then got started. And, back then, man, I don't know how you guys worked with your employees, but it was a weird time where there was remote workers, and then there was a lot of the quiet quitting happening. And then there was a big like, hey, I could get 20% more, or an extra 30,000 if I go down the street. And so when I initially got hired, I lost like every capable team member. Like, everybody left the minute I started. And so I'm like, oh crap, what's going on here? Like, Everybody left that knew how to do anything. And we had processes and playbooks and all that kind of stuff, but I was like, there's nobody who knows how to do anything anymore. So that was not what I expected, because I was actually, when I started the company, I was like, oh, hey, I'll start. They have all these processes. I'll just rebrand the thing because that's what I'm good at. I'll fix their content system. I'll recruit the content creators. This is going to be great. This is what I'm good at. And then I started doing everything else. And it was like so much work. And the way I work is I don't like kind of work. And it doesn't have to be fair. I will work myself to death because that's what I was hired to do. And that's what I'm going to do. But that said, that kind of led to the big transformation for me, where it was kind of like, all right, I did all the things. I have all the things I wanted. I have more than I've ever wanted, in terms of stuff. And then I think I remember I was walking out to my pasture to feed my horse, which I have never wanted a horse, but I had 2 horses at the time. And I was walking out there. I'm like, man, I should be really happy. Like, I have all the things. I have the position that has clout, and, I look like I'm doing great. Like, I feel nothing for this. Like, this doesn't mean anything to me at all, even a little bit. And so at that point, I realized that I had gone down a path that I thought was going to lead to satisfaction and happiness and all the things you want out of life, and realized it had nothing to do with any of that. And so at that point, I have a pretty, strict try everything policy. So as soon as I realized, like, okay, something's going wrong, I don't just try to find like a solution. I'm like, well, I'm not going to know what the solution is because obviously I haven't figured out this problem. So then I just try every solution. So let's say I gave up drinking. I signed up to run a marathon. I changed my entire diet. I started reading the Bible every day, meditating every day, cold therapy, contrast therapy, sun gazing, grounding. I just went through this list of everything. And eventually I fixed it. I found out that I essentially had IBS for my entire life. Like, I didn't realize it, but I was constantly uncomfortable. I was nauseous. I was bloated. I just had massive digestive issues that I had never addressed because I didn't know it was a problem. I kind of just assumed everybody was massively uncomfortable all the time. And this had a huge impact on my personality. On top of the fact that I'm an introvert anyways. I don't seem like an introvert, but that's energy systems or whatever. And so I tried everything. And then I had this massive failure around one point, and then I broke, and everything broke. And it just, my entire personality dissolved. and it was like waking up. And so I call it the awakening, because it was just like, oh my gosh. And I cried for like an hour. It was like, and I was like, I don't even know what's happening. And that was the start of that process. And that was probably after the first year at Digital Marketer, where my entire world perspective shifted. Then I kept working. So I think that was the part 1, right? For getting started at Digital Marketer. But Digital Marketer was a catalyst because it was just all these situations I had never faced before and had to deal with directly. And even though I had influence to do things, I really didn't have power to do everything, because the way the company was set up was marketing was centralized, it's scalable, and then every operational thing was decentral or was part of the brand. And so all I could really impact was content creation, not marketing. And so I'm like, well, they hired me to make content. And so I literally I made around 300 podcasts, and then I don't know how many YouTube videos and articles and everything else. That was all me working, and it was a recruitment system. So I was trying to recruit, new instructors and get people like, hey, will you qualify for stage? Let's have you on the podcast. Let's have you write an article. Let's have you, be part of one of these boot camps, and then you could be on stage. So I had to develop all that stuff, but, and then you had the employment issues where, just the hiring and the firing and the everything that goes into that was not. I'm actually an HR major, so I know all of the things about the process, but I don't actually enjoy it. And, honestly, I'm still an introvert. Like, if I don't have to deal with 1,000 people a day, I don't mind that. So everything was extremely taxing. On top of the fact that at the time, my personal life was also We had sort of adopted my wife's nephew because he was having problems at home. And so we had, angsty 13-year-old genius in the house. And then an au pair that didn't really like me very much. And then I do have an autistic nonverbal son who goes to full-time therapy. So it's just like massive personal issues, massive business issues. And that kind of led to the transformation. But now I'm past all that and things are better. And, being there for 2.5 years, like that was me going the distance. That was like, man, I was there for 2.5 years. And people, I even laugh at it myself because I'm like, it's not that long. But for me, somebody who's always been a business owner and just a dedicated entrepreneur since I was like 7 years old, like having a job is like going to prison. It's not that, but that's kind of where I'm at. I'm like, yeah, I'm clocking in, and this is what I'm doing right now, but it's not something I'm happy about. And it's really just about the effect you can have, because it's like, it doesn't matter how awesome I do and how much money I could make the company, because at the end of the day, I'm capped at whatever I agreed to at the beginning, So yeah, it was time to go. Like so much before I left. But my process for leaving is actually very systematic, because I'm a very conservative person, even though it seems like I'm kind of out there, where I don't make decisions until I've thought about it for maybe a year or more. And it's not just for massive life decisions. It could be like, I really need a new camera, but I'm not going to buy one until I think about it for a year, because anything over, I'm very cheap too. Anything over $250, like that's a lot of money. I gotta considerations. So yeah, it took me a long time. So I thought about it a long time ago, and then I put it into place. And the funny thing is, I actually left Digital Marketer way before, 3 months before I left Digital Marketer, because I essentially said, hey guys, I need to make more money. And we just couldn't come around to fixing that. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense for me here. Like at this rate, it just doesn't make any sense. You either need to up it to this, or I need to be able to take contracts essentially. And so I switched over to be a contractor 3 months prior to actually leaving. And then I got other gigs at the same time. So essentially for, half a year, I was working full time for multiple companies, and I was making a lot of money. But it was horrendously taxing, like just exhausting. I'm still recovering right now because it was that much work, where basically I had a client on the East Coast, a client on the West Coast, and then I was still doing my job. And it was just like, I don't know, 100-hour weeks, just not even sleeping, just getting up at 4 a.m. and then like not even finishing meetings until maybe 8 o'clock at night. And the meetings, oh my God, the meetings were just like 8 a day, 10 a day. Like sometimes that would happen. And so, and I knew I had a capacity. I've done this before where I've burnt out. So I know my limit, and I'm like, okay, I could do this for this amount of time before I ultimately just collapse. Like I won't be functional anymore if I go past this limit. So I did all the things, and then the whole process actually led to what I'm doing right now, which is what I call the AI branding framework, where essentially it's how to integrate the core element that I think is wrong with the majority of businesses, which is a failure to execute the vision of the owner. If you track everything back that goes wrong with companies, most of the time that's the problem. And what they do is they outsource all these functions that should essentially be centralized with the vision. And instead, it's just this person's opinion and that person's opinion and this person's opinion. It has nothing to do cohesively. It's just a bunch of individual, aspects of people's view for what this company should be. And so I came up with this framework because I was like, we haven't been able to execute branding well because it's just too much work to centralize. It's just impossible until AI came around. And now you actually can centralize a concept and use AI to propagate it in every department. And so that's what I'm working on now. But all of it's because of 20 years of trial and error and ego death and awakening, and then stages of that.
Well, that's a lot to unpack. Kevin, Dr. De La Plante is sort of our resident unpacker. So I'm gonna set up a little framework for everything you just said, and then ask Kevin to kind of help unpack. So, there's sort of um, the psychological state of dealing with what you were familiar with. The ups and downs of dealing with different kinds of clients and feast and famine, maybe a little bit, and success and failure, getting an opportunity to maybe go into something different that it presumably would have more stability, very prestigious, et cetera, et cetera. In the middle of that, you faced again some of the psychological dynamics of being kind of in that other place where it was you kind of pushing all the buttons. Maybe your expectations weren't quite in alignment with what you were experiencing. Had a kind of a massive personal transition in the middle of it. Realization and awakening, and then coming to a place where you realize that to really get to where you needed to be. And it sounds like a lot of your decisions were around what kind of existence do I want to experience in my life? What I'm experiencing now in my existence isn't what I think ultimately is where I should be. Let's now try this again into this new form, which is the branding and this massive platform you've just started. So with that framework in mind, Kevin, I'm going to give it to you to see if you can kind of lead us through a conversation to get kind of the deeper meaning and maybe the lessons that we can extract from it.
Great. That's quite a summary. It's quite a narrative, Mark, but also quite a summary, John. I'll say it. Two things stood out to me. One was the recurring theme about you trying to empower others to succeed on their own, do it for you, training systems, build systems, hand it off. Sort of driven to that, that seemed to be a point of satisfaction for you, and you moved into roles where you were doing something you're good at, right? And then reported to us, even at the height of that, not enjoying the work.
Mm.
An intense sense of dissatisfaction, like I don't want to be doing this. Whereas on kind of on paper, you are doing the thing that you're trying, you're trying to fulfill this thing. You are building systems, you are empowering others, but there was something that was there's a gap there. And then the question of like, well, what's the gap? And is the gap something that you didn't understand until you had hit bottom personally?
Mm.
That there was something broken, or was that something that in retrospect you can see its roots from earlier stages of your life?
No, it's definitely earlier, because I think what I had, because growing up, I went to a private school in California in Orange County. And so there were a lot of affluent people. Like I was just always kind of around successful men. And I had an uncle, my uncle Bill Vardulis. He was actually the mayor of Irvine for a little bit, but he had the successful engineering firm and the house in Newport on the top of a hill. And he was kind of like my goal. I was like, man, Uncle Bill, he's just killing it. And everybody loves him, and he has all this stuff. And so when I was in second grade, I would literally stay in at recess, and I had my parents buy me an architecture set with a compass and graph paper so I could design mansions. And my friend Jack and I would sit in at recess, and we'd design these mansions that we'd all live in. And it was what we did for fun. So I think what happened was I had this foundational sense that money provides happiness, and that was it. Like if you had enough money, you could be happy. Now, the underlying issue was that I had massive digestive problems that were actually just making me, I was actually diagnosed with dysthymia, which is a low-grade depression. I describe it as you don't want to kill yourself, but you're literally never happy. And so I was dealing with this at the same time. So literally anything could have been the definition of happiness, but that's what I landed on. And so and again, I'm very disciplined. I'm very principled. And so if I say this is the thing, then I don't modify that unless there's some massive reason to change it. So essentially what I was doing was going after happiness, which was one direction, except the thing I thought was going to get me there was in the exact opposite direction. And it took me realizing that to make the shift that no, money does not provide happiness. Money is a resource and it's necessary and it's like food and water, but food and water don't necessarily make you happy, and definitely money doesn't. And so it took me all of those things to do, and to get the proof I needed, I had to achieve the thing. I had to get all the money that I thought I needed, and then I could be, nope, that wasn't it, just cross it off the list. That wasn't the thing. You screwed up. That wasn't the goal. And so that's what happened. So now I realize the goal for me is just helping people, just period. That's the goal. That's, if I'm doing that, then I'm actually achieving the thing that I always wanted. And the more people achieve, the actual happier I can become and more satisfied I can become. And it does have financial reward with it too. And I have a lot of expenses, so that's necessary. But it just doesn't provide any happiness for me. So I had to, that, and also my work environment's very important. And being told to do something, I'm kind of a rebel at the end of the day. Like, I hate being told how. I hate big organizational structures, even though I know exactly how to create them. Which is another thing, because that
you and I have a lot in common, by the way. I'm keeping my mouth shut, but there's a lot of yeah, I get it.
Yeah, I'm just waiting. I'm glad, John. The restraint that John has shown in this conversation so far is remarkable. Trust me.
Well, before we get too far away from what you just said, the top level of what you said, it sounds very ordinary to people who have self-realization. It's like, I want to help people, right? I want to contribute to people. That's sort of bundled in with what you said. I want to go a couple layers deeper and back up from that realization. And I want to ask you a little bit about the context of the important people in your life that were helping you think through this. Because I know for me, the things that have helped the most through transitions like the ones that you have been discussing, the thing that's helped me the most is to be surrounded by really worthy people, capable people who then I in turn actually listen to because I trust them. Can you relate a little bit about what it was like going through the thinking around transitioning into digital marketers and then transitioning out, and then maybe even through your self-realization? Talk about your crew. Talk about the people around you, and how is it that you realized that the people that should be allowed in your inner circle were the people who really were worthy to be in your inner circle?
Oh man, that is a great question. And I have a pretty trippy answer for you because I had no people. I had my family. But what I had essentially done with my personality was I had built this shell that I thought people wanted, because at my core, I thought I was 100% worthless. And so everybody else was above me. So literally, I'd take advice from everybody because from my perspective, you're better than me. And so it took me, I had to realize that too, to be like, oh my God, that's a major problem. Like, you think you're worthless? Like, that's crazy. Like, you can't, that doesn't work. It doesn't flow with anything that you believe in. But I had to acknowledge that. I had to say, like, okay, this is not good. Now, luckily, I have my wife Jamie, and she was able to see past that and saw me, and that's why we have a good relationship. And then I had my kids. I had my son Damien and Declan, and I'm really living for these people that I'm have to take care of. And so that was good. But in terms of friends, I had no real friends, because I wasn't being a real person at the time. Never shared my opinion, never said what I was actually thinking. I was just delivering the, whatever phrase that they expected. And I was like, well, it's an acceptable thing to say. Right. And so I thought everybody was boring, because I was like, why doesn't anybody ever say anything interesting? I watch these movies and I read these books and everybody's having these amazing conversations all the time, but that never happens to me. And then I realized that I was boring because I wasn't actually sharing anything ever. And so when I realized that, then I came, well, that's my phrase on the screen behind me, share everything. It was like, it came to me in a meditation. It was just like, you know what? Just share everything. Just tell everybody everything you're thinking and then see what happens. And that's what happened. I started saying everything, and then everybody started getting super interesting to me because they started sharing things back. And I'm like, oh, okay, I just screwed that up again. And I totally misread everybody for my entire life, which that's a whole nother story of going back through my memories and realizing that I had been wrong most of the time. But yeah, once I solved that problem, then, and before, it was really, the transformation really came from my son Damien, because my son Damien is 11, and he's, the sweet, he's not sweet, he's actually a little tricky, but he's super bright, he's an amazing person, but he's nonverbal, and he's gonna live with us forever. Like, he's never gonna live on his own. He won't even live in like a side house, because that's our property now. It has an apartment on it. I was like, oh, maybe eventually he could live there. No, he's that's probably not going to happen. So then it became, oh my gosh, I have to live forever, because the abuse statistics for autistic people, especially nonverbal ones, is just astounding. Like, I don't want to talk about that, but I'm like, he's never going in a home. If I have to live in a box on the side of the road because nobody else could take care of him, I'm going to do that. So then I decided that I had to be really in shape and I had to stay alive. And so that was actually my motivation for figuring everything out. Because for me, the person who thought they were worthless, I was like, well, I don't care what happens to me. I don't technically care about my own health, because why would you care about that for something that's worthless? And so I had to shift that perspective. And then I had to, the transformation was really that realization, like, I have to survive, and not only survive, my son's going to be like my dad. My dad's 6'5", 300 pounds, played rugby and football. And my son is like, I don't know the exact version of that. So he's going to be much bigger than me, much stronger than me, and taller than everything. And he's very athletic too. So then I was like, okay, I got to be, not only live forever, I have to be physically capable for as long as possible. So then I started training again. I have a fitness background, so I'm like, I know how to do this. But yeah, that was the initial catalyst for the change. And then now I have a whole list of friends and people I could call on whenever I need anything. And it's just like a completely different life. I'm like, this is what having friends and people you could depend on means. This is fantastic. I should have started this like a long time ago.
What's your process for inviting people into your team, the filter process now, and how would that be different now than it was a couple of years ago?
It's actually the exact same. So the process I use at DigitalMarketer to recruit, capable speakers and instructors was, I'd start with a podcast. Say, hey, come on the podcast, give me a topic. We'll talk about the topic. And if, it goes well, like we jive and your concepts are good and you have a system and not just, a random case study that worked, then we're good. Then we'll start working together. And so that's essentially that's how I found most of my networkers. I've interviewed them on podcasts.
But then you are still playing the role of chief visionary and chief integrator, system builder, right? The visionary and the CEO sort of role, both of those. You're
It's
still
every.
now in that seat, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, and all the stuff I'm developing, every design you see is actually me personally creating it. Like, I don't outsource
Okay.
much of anything at this point. Now I need to, but I don't feel comfortable doing that until I have like a set process, like a step by step. I could hand this off to you, and I know if you do exactly what it says, I'm going to get the result I want. If I haven't developed something to that point, then I don't feel qualified to outsource it or even hire for it, which is not the best. Sometimes I say that people who don't have this kind of like deep level of thinking actually make way more progress, because they're just like, I don't know any better. Here, go do the thing. I don't care. And I'm like, oh man, it's actually a not bad trait to have, which is why sometimes you see really dumb, successful people where you're like, how did you get successful? I don't see how this works. And that's the case sometimes, because they didn't overcomplicate stuff that doesn't have to be complicated. So yeah, that's what I do.
I want to stay within this bucket of crew and team and kind of separate into two sub buckets. One is the people influencing you and helping shape you or co-creating with you, and then the people that you are mentoring and delegating to. And so looking first at the bucket of people that you're co-creating with and people mentoring you, people influencing you, as you've kind of transitioned from not having a lot of friends to having more friends. One of the things you stated a couple minutes ago was, part of the hard thing is to really open up and ask real questions. Kind of opens me up to scrutiny, or for people to realize, hey, he doesn't really know everything. He doesn't maybe have his act together in every way. And so the temptation is just to kind of keep our mouth shut. I know from my own personal experience, because when I went from the stage where I was the founder and only leader at LENKER, with a very small crew, to what we are today, which is much larger. um, I brought in and asked three people that I really respected to come and be partners, one at a time. Kevin was the first, then Brian Howe, and then eventually Asaf Ari. And one of the things that happens pretty quickly when you're co-creating, and with, especially like in a partnership situation, but I think it also can apply to, like, if you have a board of directors or a crew of people you've asked to, hey, help guide and steer me, is that when you open up and you are real and you do make yourself vulnerable, very quickly the people who are going to have the biggest impact on you through their advice, uh, and contributions, they they are going to not allow you to lie to yourself
Mm.
and to step into old familiar patterns that have limited you in the past. And then it really just kind of, and sometimes it's painful. It's been painful for me, I can tell you, especially with our CEO, Asaf, who doesn't put up with any nonsense. And I'm sort of the guy who likes to kind of at least dabble in nonsense.
Feel it out. Yeah, I get that.
Maybe talk a little bit about how that experience has played out in your life, where as you've opened up more to people, and they have seen you for who you are, and they've tried to help you identify things that maybe need to change for you to move on to the next level, or to avoid sliding back into a previous level.
Mm.
Tell me a little bit about the interpersonal dynamics, or tell us a little bit about the interpersonal dynamics around that, and what some of the come to Jesus moments have been for you, um, in the middle of all that.
Yeah, you know what? I think my wife is probably the one who's seen it the most, right? Because we've been through a ton of stuff. And actually, the original business that I mentioned that I sold to On It, she was a big part of that, And then what I didn't mention was, after we actually sold the company to On It, she immediately started a new company, a baby boutique that was local. And then she built it and sold it, or we built it and sold it together too. So she's always been, the voice of reason. She's a accountant, and she's always 100% real, and will just say, this is it, versus me, who's the dreamer and, kind of distracted, I would say, which is why I have a million projects going on all the time. And so has always been my voice of reason. But that said, I have changed quite a bit, and now I'm actually more confident. So I do have a new group of guys that I just run ideas by. And a lot of times what I think might be revolutionary, they'll literally just say, like, oh yeah, no, don't do that. I've done that before. And so, like, Joshua B. Lee, he's the dopamine dealer of LinkedIn. He's one of my guys I'll go to a lot and be like, hey, here's what I'm thinking. Jeff J. Hunter, he's another one. And he's running something really similar for even the AI training stuff that I'm doing. And what I've found is it's, when you have people you can trust, you don't even mind if you're technically competitors. In my book, I'm like, who cares? There's plenty of people out here. There's plenty of opportunity. And honestly, it'll make both of our systems better if we are sort of selling to the same group. And there's nothing wrong with that. Competition in general, there's nothing wrong with. Actually, people being offended by competition, I'm offended by that, because I'm like, what do you want? You want all of it? You want 100%? You think that's a good thing? Because that's what we have right now. and it sucks. And so we need to compete, and we need to be okay with that. And we want people to be better than us because that makes us better too.
I'm interested in a bunch of things. When I'm looking at your new site, the Mark de
Oh, Mark de
Grasse.com
Grasse,
site, and you've got your various branches of the brand laid out. And what we have here is something like a personal brand as the top level thing, and then you have um, courses, and you have business training and development for clients, and you've got consulting, and you've got podcast, and you've got the magazine, which is tied to the AI initiative, right? And then you've got really your earlier interest in personal development have been folded back into the business marketing stuff. Which sounds like, to me, it seems like, oh, you're sort of aligning all the different parts of your psychology and your heart, your head, your body, all. There's probably a fitness element in there too that I'm not seeing
Oh
yet,
yeah.
but I bet it's there. So it looks like alignment is happening, and that's a good sign, right, for personal growth and health, right? Aligning your internal psychology with your exterior manifestation of that is a good sign. I wonder about how you if you sort of see it at all in those terms as an effort to integrate the different parts of yourself into something that feels like it's a whole representation of you.
Yes. No, that's super intuitive. That's exactly what I'm doing. And essentially it goes back to this kind of core concept that I don't think there's any separation between anything that we do. My entire podcast, if you listen to all the episodes, is basically me trying to integrate your management of whatever with your home life. And so it's, I'm a dad and middle-aged. And so that's who I talk to. And I'm trying to bring this out of them to help them. And most of, my guests realize that that's what I'm doing. But I'm like, no, there's no separation between how you treat your employees and how you treat your kids. And if there is a giant separation between those two things, you're a liar. And at the end of the day, I can't stand lying. I can't stand dishonesty in general. And so if I, see it, then I need to squash it, or hopefully help people realize that it's not a necessary way to live. But what you say about the alignment of the brand is exactly that. I'm trying to show that you could integrate all these aspects of yourself into everything that you do and probably be a lot more happy and successful if you do that. And that's combined with my principle of never helping people do something I haven't done myself. It's literally why I podcast, because I had a client at the time that was like, hey, I'm thinking about a podcast. I'm like, well, I know how to do that technically, but I've never actually done it. And I'm not willing to sell something I haven't actually done. And so I started podcasting. And so, yeah, it's all aligned. And it's actually going back to my original business model, which for the business that I sold, where I had a content platform, which was essentially looked like an unbiased third party that's just providing information to everybody. And then I have the money making component, which is the partner platform, where all of the ads that you will eventually see on my three major I call them content machines: Podcast Mark, Magazine Mark, and then Daily Mark, which is my temporary video newsletter where I actually destroy the video after 2 days. And each one of those will eventually lead back to my actual platform, which, I'll tell you guys, it's called aibranding.academy. And that's where I'm going to put all of my courses and then fold all of my friends back into to build courses with me. And then that's going to be the money making machine. But it's not going to look like the two are necessarily connected, except all the ads you're going to eventually see on all my other platforms are going to point back to the academy. So, there's all a system.
It's the traditional digital marketing funnel, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just standard content marketing. And that's where I came from, because what I realized back when because I originally had a gym. And so what I wanted to do, I was part of a startup after I got out of college. And after the startup, I was like, hey, I want to get into online. Like, I just want to be online. And I think that's where the future's going. I'll get online. And I had a friend who was in fitness, and I was like, hey, well, you could do the fitness crap. I'll do all the shooting and making the website and importing the product and doing all that stuff. All you have to do is be the fitness person, and then we'll categorize the information. And so I realized was, nobody does this. Nobody has a data set for anything. And especially in fitness, they can't even agree on how to say the word push-up. Is it 2 words? Is there a hyphen? Is it 1 word? And so I'm like, nobody's standardized anything. So then I just started standardizing everything. I said, hey, here's the syntax of naming a workout. Here's how you call every single exercise. Here's a short demo of every single exercise. And it wasn't revolutionary to me. It was actually kind of stupid that I couldn't find the information in the first place. And so we just started doing that. And, eventually he, had personal issues. And so we had to end the partnership, and I had to step in as the fitness person. And I'm not even that into fitness. I just do it because I think it's necessary. And, everybody should be physically capable. Like that's pretty basic. So that's why I did it, but I was never interested in it. And so then I partnered with all these people and started recruiting people to actually make the content. And then it led to everything else. So essentially I'm just a curator for most things. And then I learn along the way. That's why I worked with people in 24 different industries. So a lot of times you could almost mention any industry and I'll have some insight into it just because I probably had to research it at some point.
You're like us a little bit. We're in the business of transformation, right? Metamorphosis. The butterflies. Our logo, and you've certainly gone through different incarnations and becoming something better, something newer, and your whole career right now is really around branding and helping people kind of identify their own personal value proposition and then kind of distill themselves into the next version of themselves that's going to lead their business to the next level. So that in a sense, your brand is really all about self-therapy as a business person to figure out who you are, become more of who you are, and boil it down into something that's going to give you that perfect work-life balance where there's an integrity between the two, where there's a sense of wholeness and fulfillment that can go the distance and doesn't burn you out. I mean, that really seems to be kind of the nutshell around all of this, and maybe we can edit this together in a way that kind of lets that unfold. But how do you react to what I just said? Because it seems like it's all kind of the same stuff.
It is. Well, and what I realize, especially with this whole AI boom, is that it's the perfect opportunity for literally everybody to do this. Because the way I see it, I'm going to finish my book. I've been writing it for like a year, but it's about the concept of AI as a wildfire, and as a wildfire spreads in random, chaotic fashion and unpredictable ways, and it destroys everything. It also creates an environment where essentially you don't have dominant players that have been, shading the ground for everybody else and keeping everybody down. Those are now gone, and it leads to what they call the succession and fires, where you have fertile ground, you have sunlight, you have opportunity, and that's what we're headed towards. And so I think if there's ever been a time when people should reinvent themselves and be open to the failure of their former versions, it's right now, because everything's about to collapse. And so my end goal is really to prepare people for that collapse that I see coming, and especially middle-aged men who may have built their entire personalities, whether they realize it or not, on their careers. And if those careers were suddenly non-existent, what would happen to these people? And my motivation is really to decrease the suicide rate among middle-aged men, specifically in America, because that's what we're facing. And if the guys don't have any hope for the future, then it's going to be really bad. So that you did a great job of summing it up. I just have a very roundabout way of approaching almost everything. But at the end, I'm just trying to I don't really understand people that well. And so I have to kind of make up my own concept of what they want and then come up with a solution that I think will work. But I also am very conservative, so I hedge my bets by actually approaching it in like 5 different directions, hoping that one of them will work. And we'll see if it works.
So kind of the moral of the story, kind of inspiring thought that I'm left with after listening to your story over this last 54 minutes, is that especially in light of what you're saying is going to happen in our society. AI is going to bring a sea change in terms of how we all function and operate within, the mechanism of our economy and the marketplace. Is that the decisions that we make as we transition from stage to stage in our we say career, but really it's our life journey, right? And some of these transitions may not feel like climbing the career ladder, right? But they may feel more like climbing the the ladder of personal fulfillment and well-being, even though there may be kind of like this, as the well-being thing is climbing, maybe the corporate career sense is diminishing, at least on paper, from a status standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
But from an ultimate succeeding at life standpoint, um, there is a path forward for just about anybody, that if they can put aside kind of the enculturation that we've experienced, um, especially those of us who are Generation X, that the ultimate symbol of success in life is status, and the size of your portfolio, and how much wealth you have and equity and all these things. But so the kind of summary is, whatever you do has got to be really personal, right? It's something that you've got to connect to the innermost part of yourself in a way that's really true. So it's got to be personal. It's got to have some kind of integrity in terms of alignment with your true skills and competencies and aspirations, and the nature of the work that you're doing. So there has to be an integrity between that. And then just the pursuit of self development, which your website is all about. Going deeper, educating yourself, transforming yourself. That the commitment to that is probably going to take you away from the mold that you grew up with, and that the thing that's going to make you look at yourself and say, you know what, I like you. I feel good about being you, as you look yourself in the mirror. And the things that I'm going to work on over the next season of time are going to bring me to a place where I even have more of a sense of joy and fulfillment in my daily living. And I think maybe one of my personal hopes for you, Mark, is that over the next couple of years of your life, you actually learn to enjoy to ride horses, and to be out there
I haven't
spending
been.
time.
No,
But is that fair? Does that any of that
that's
resonate with either of you guys?
Yeah, no, that's excellent. That's a great way to put it. Because I mean, at the end of the day, like, fulfillment needs to come right now. Because I think we've all been convinced that it's just some future thing that you will achieve eventually if you just work hard enough. And the more I've kind of gone into the self development and this integration of my work self and my personal self, the more I've realized, like, no, fulfillment needs to happen right now. You should be satisfied right now. And if you're not, then there's probably a problem. And if you hoping that there's some dream future where it all pays off is futile, and it's a waste of time, because you're not happy right now. And why would you expect the future you to be able to be happy if you can't be happy now? So, and not to say that you have to be happy in every instance, but you do need to be present, and you need to stop saying this expectation that things are going to get better if you're not willing to make the decisions right now to actually make that happen. So yeah, it's stop separating yourself and putting things into boxes, and essentially being part of this matrix that we've all been duped into believing, because it's all BS. Nothing matters. The job, oh, I'm going to go through the motion and be the youngest whatever. Who cares? None of that matters. None of it. And what the world's showing us right now is that it's all so fragile that it could just be lost almost instantly, just like your life could. So why are you operating like any of it matters? I'm going pretty existential right now, but when you get to that level, you start to realize it doesn't just apply to your spiritual life or your religious life or your home family life. It's like literally every decision that you make should be in alignment. Otherwise, you're wasting time and being dishonest.
I'm going to thank you, but I'm going to make one. I'm going to add a final note with my own
Please.
sort of perspective between the two of you, talking about the value of learning about these entrepreneurial skills and having what it can do, and especially Mark, when you mentioned about middle-aged men who could be impacted by social and technological change in a way that can leave them really at odds, right, with what this next stage of their life is supposed to look like. I think that's a very. I understand now the why. That version of your why, I think, is very pointed. That you could be helping develop a skill set for a class of people who otherwise were never encouraged to do it, because we were sold a story about employment with an employer and saving for retirement, and we're going to be taken care of, and then that's not going to happen now. And then even the jobs that we have, we can't transition, we can't go laterally. What's the opportunity for us? There's a lot of despair that can be in that picture. Well, one of the things that I learned as I shifted from my career as an academic to my career as an entrepreneur online was that one of the things that allows you to do, it opens you up that in a way that enables the possibility of personal growth that may not have been possible before. For example, if I'm always getting paid the same in the job, regardless of how good or bad I am at the job, I can continue on that thinking I'm great. And then, or if I feel really bad about myself, I can continue to feel bad about myself, and reality doesn't step in to push you into another mode, a new reality. But when you open yourself up to the market in some way, in that broad sense, you expose yourself and say, "This is what I'm offering. This is my opinions, or the thing I can make, or the service," and then people can say, "I like that." You have a validation and you have feedback. You can say, "Oh, I changed this. I get feedback. Oh, like that. Now I'm learning. Now I'm adapting." So the combination of humility and openness and adaptability, very good for personal growth. And if you learn to leverage that and use all these digital tools, the capability that we have to bring our personal self to a market we could benefit someone has never been higher, right? I saw that myself in my own journey, that there's an opportunity here, and that aligns, your mission with, in fact, an opportunity for a certain class of people, of which we're in that age group. And who knows what opportunities you could be affording them. So, congratulations on that.
That's a great point, because I think I didn't even mention that side. Like, AI is the greatest learning tool we've ever had in the world, and it's the greatest work multiplier than we've ever had. I mean, it's just incredible. So it's like, instead of looking at this as like, oh no, all the jobs are falling apart, it's like, everybody hated these jobs. You hated these jobs. You might hate the whole industry that you're in, but you're stuck there because you've been there for so long that your whole network is dependent on it. No, it's all gone. It's all burning down. We're going to have to start over. But now we have awesome tool that you can learn anything you want, and it's almost free. So be happy and figure out what you actually want. That's actually the hardest part. Like, what do you want to do? Okay. You need to take some insight. It's not what you think it is, probably. But no, this has been fantastic. Thank you guys so much for letting me come on and rant as much as I have. And I can't even go into the stuff I did most of the time, because I have to talk about business all the time. This has been great.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. You've been so generous with your time. Your story is really inspiring to us, and I think our audiences are going to find an enormous amount of value out of hearing this story, and we can relate to so much of it. So thank you once again, and we wish you all the best in your future project.
We hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did. I loved how John and Kevin really let Mark speak and just tell his story. Visit markdegrasse.com to see everything Mark's up to these days, and definitely check out his AI Branding Academy, where membership is launching soon. If you learned something today, leave a rating and review wherever you're listening, and hit the follow button to be notified of new episodes. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you soon.